Darin Henley here with you, CBMZ, the Carolina Beach Music Zone, and Darin and Anita on Grand Strand. I'm here in Kannapolis, North Carolina at the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. And folks, if you haven't experienced this place, you need to make a trip over here to do this because it's incredible. And here's a gentleman that makes it incredible, the man who runs the whole place, somewhat besides Veronica sitting off to the side. We'll talk to her a little bit later on. Eddie Ray. Eddie, how are you, sir?
Hello, Daryl.
It is great to meet you. I was in town for the induction ceremony a few weeks back, and that's where I first got to see all of this, and I was like blown away. Eddie, how did to get started, I guess, and how did you get started in the entertainment business? I know you're from Franklin, North Carolina originally, and you've moved into a little every facet of the entertainment business. I know you did a little stint in the Army in the early days.
Yes, I did. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for coming to visit us, and it was great seeing you at the induction ceremony.
It was a great time.
Thank you. Yes, I'm from Franklin, North Carolina, a little town up in the mountains of the Great Smoky Mountains, the western part of the state of North Carolina.
And you went into the Army, and then once you got discharged for the Army, that's when the whole entertainment or the record business started. I know you were a stock boy in the origins of all that for Decca Records.
Yes, I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was sent out by the employment agency to a factory. And I walked into the place, you know, and all these 6 feet, 8, 250-pound guys, I walked in, it was a foundry. And they said, get out of here, you can't do this. And I did not argue with them. I left, and the employment agency sent me to Decca Record Distributing Company, where I got a job as a stock boy. Now, if you don't know what a stock boy is, that's the lowest level in the shipping clerk. I did what no one else wanted to do, like loading the trucks, unloading the trucks, packing records, and that type of thing.
Right. Incredible. There, and then from Decca, you moved on.
It got very cold there, and I saw pictures in a travelogue magazine of beautiful Southern California. And I said, that's where I need to be. So I went to Southern California, and then there I got a job with an independent record company, and I got a promotion as the assistant shipping clerk. And the name of the label was Aladdin Records, one of the early independent record companies.
I think I've seen the label at the radio station before on some of the 45s and things. You could put Aladdin on there.
Yes, Aladdin, and they had artists like Charles Brown, you know, who was the later blues singer, Amos Milburn, and he had a lot of big hits like Chicken Shack Boogie. And there I worked and was going to school at night at LA City College.
And so you graduated, while you worked for there, actually, you graduated college.
I graduated from LA City College and but then after leaving there, I got a job with an independent record company that represented about 95% of all the independents, like Aladdin and Atlantic and Chess and Checker, and that's where my career really started in the music.
And would that be with Central Records?
Central Records sales.
When you did that, and they had folks like Ruth Brown.
Everybody. We had Ruth Brown, B.B. King.
Wow.
Everybody. The Clovers, and then later the Drifters, and Sam Cooke. In fact, Sam Cooke at that time was singing with a gospel group called the Pilgrim Travelers, and Lou Rawls had him. He was singing with a gospel group called the Pilgrim Travelers, and before they went pop, of course, and had not a big.
So it's like R&B. It all started in the church.
Exactly.
And come on out from there. Well, I tell you, you started writing there with Ruth. I think it was Ruby Jackson.
It was a group out in San Bernardino. It's called, and he and I started putting songs together. I originally was interested in becoming a songwriter because I thought I was a pretty good writer. Right. But I found out later that I saw too many starving songwriters, so I decided to learn more about the record business. But I was fortunate in having one huge #1 hit record.
Huge song,
yes.
Heart of Stone.
Heart Made of Stone, and it was recorded eventually about over 32 artists, including artists like Elvis Presley and the McGuire sisters, who were hot during those days. Fontaine's sisters had it #1 in country, but Red Foley. And
John Fogerty, I believe.
Fogerty did it, and the Charms had it #1 in R&B. So
just
I was
tons
very
of folks.
successful with that.
I'm telling you, and it's a great song still. I know
it still sells.
Still
right.
sells, and
Still
before we
sells.
came out to do the interview today, when I was in studio, I went through the archives of music and saw that whole list of artists who had.
Rather than be considered as a one-hit artist, which frankly I was, I did have other songs recorded and released through a big music publishing company called EMI Music.
Oh yeah,
yes,
for sure. And you worked for a part of EMI, as we'll get to.
Later on, right. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, from there you formed an R&B record label, actually, with two other gentlemen.
Yes, and it was Hearts of Stones. It was the first record by the Jewels, and with Rudy Jackson as the lead singer. And we sold 50,000 in the LA market alone, but I was unable to take it nationally. And so instead, this is when I left the Central Record Sales Company and joined, which turned out to be my most successful during those days tenure, a label called Imperial Records. And I was fortunate there to work with guys such as Fats Domino, and all of his had 19 consecutive million sellers. Ricky Nelson, his first 7 million sellers from the time he's 16 to he's 21. And then later guys like Johnny Rivers and a host of other hit artists we had on the
tons of folks now. Ernie K-Do, Smiley Lewis, going back.
Yes,
Irma Thomas.
Irma Thomas. I produced records there too. I had chart records by Irma Thomas, by Ernie Freeman, who was one of the great arrangers of his era, who arranged for a lot of big artists. Songs like by artists like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, everybody. And he also did the arrangement for my song, Hearts of Stones.
Oh, incredible. And your title actually there was National Director of Promotion and Sales.
Yes, at the time it was one of the early, for as an African American, it was one of the early national.
You paved the way for a lot of African American folks coming along, I do believe, and what I've read about you. And there's more about Eddie Ray. There's a whole book about Eddie, actually. But from there, I tell you, Eddie, it just moved. We've already went from Decca Records, folks, as a stock boy. Wait, just in a few years, and you're already National Director of Promotion and Sales.
Yes.
So you're climbing the ladder fairly fast here, Eddie.
Yes, very fast.
Fairly fast, because your next moves with Capitol Records in Hollywood, and you were the A&R director for Tower Records, which is a subsidiary of those folks.
Wholly owned subsidiary, and I was with them as a director of the Tower division. But within a year and a half, in 1965, I was appointed vice president, and again, one of the early African Americans for a major record company, major label.
Strides, you're paving the way.
And I spent 5 years with Capitol and did very, very well. We had a lot of hit records.
And then you sort of, I'm going to say, dabbled in the television business.
Yes, for 1 year. But you know, it's a funny thing. I handled all the music for this company, and they produced network television shows. And they did with Ray Charles and the LA Philharmonic Orchestra. But they also produced a show with Glenn Campbell at the time was #1. Dionne Warwick was #2 in the nation with a hit record. And the songwriter that wrote most of Dionne's hits, it was on A&M Records, and he had an album in the charts. But anyway, while there, I did what we called I did an album for Chevrolet, General Motors, with these 3 artists, and we were really announcing the new models, 1969, believe it or not, models, Chevrolets that was introduced on our TV show, and it was a giant hit.
Yeah, you sold over a
million copies in the United States and another 500,000 copies in Canada.
Incredible. Incredible. Well, from there you moved on to MGM Records in Hollywood, California, as senior VP and A&R.
And the strange was there with a young guy there named Mike Curb, who became president of MGM. But Mike had been one of the independent producers that I had signed while at Capitol Records, and he was a young man then, about 17, 18 years of age. But this time he had become president of MGM Records, and I joined him for 5 years as his senior vice president of A&R administration. And so we had.
But you were over 3 areas. You were. I'm sorry to step on you there, but the Hollywood, California, Nashville. So you're like 3 huge areas there.
Yes, that's right. Well, Hollywood. It was in Memphis, where I spent most of my time in Tennessee, and there I spent with artists like Al Green. He was the executive vice president and general manager of High Records there in Memphis, as well as other things I was involved in through my own company there in Memphis, and had 5 very wonderful, productive years in Memphis. And there's when I started my school.
Yeah, the vocational
College
school
for Recording Arts and Sciences. And so.
How did you get into that to actually start a school to teach folks?
It was strange. There was one other school similar to that. The only one I know in the United States was in San Francisco. It's in Oakland, California, San Francisco, called California School of Commercial. This was a vocational commercial music school that taught all aspects of the music business, and he owned a recording studio there in a former professor at the University of San Francisco. His name is Leo DeCalco. So I patterned my school because I was part owner of a recording studio there in Memphis, and had the facility, had the engineers, had. Everybody was part of the organization that were qualified to teach. And then I brought in one of the top entertainment lawyers in the city and so forth and so on. And so we had a very successful vocational school, which eventually we merged into the University of Memphis, which is a degree granting program now to this day.
So if I wanted to go to school there now and take all that, I could, right?
You could,
okay.
Yes.
So I might have to do that so I can learn more about the music business. Well, the next big thing, here's something that was huge to me that happened, and this was with the, I guess the government, if you want to say, is that you were put in charge of, I got to find my sheet, Eddie. You were put in charge by Ronald Reagan of the Tribune.
Yes, what happened, there was an agency created called the Copyright Royalty Tribunal in Washington, D.C. as part of the Copyright Office. It wasn't part of the Copyright, it was an independent agency where we had exercised a tremendous amount of control over the operation of copyrights, regarding copyrights. For instance, we set the rates that users had to pay, like for instance, a record company had to pay a publisher or the songwriter for the use of his copyrights. We've set the rates that cable companies, when they would retransmit a broadcast signal, and when those programs were telecast on the cable system, we set the rate that the cable system had to pay. And we did it with PBS public, in NPR radio and PBS television and other areas. And so what happened, then the monies were paid in to the Copyright Office, and then we would disperse that.
That's how the artists got paid.
That's how they got paid. So during my tenure there, I was chairman of this agency for 4 years, and we dispersed over billions of dollars. It's almost newfound money for musicians and I mean for songwriters and music publishers. I was appointed by President Ronald Reagan and confirmed by the United States Senate as a U.S. Commissioner of Copyright, which I served for 8.5 years in Washington.
Incredible time. And there, from there,
I retired.
You retired, yeah. It was good there. We're going to have to code up. And now you're sort of a consultant for.
Yes, I did.
Yes,
an independent consultant for different companies in Texas and Tennessee and various places.
And here's something very interesting. We're getting to the Hall of Fame itself and how you came a part of that, but you also write poetry.
Oh yes, as an application, it was strange, Del. There again, there's something. I guess it went back to the days when I wanted to be a songwriter.
Right.
And see, and I was not, believe it or not, after spending over 60 years, I was not a musician, but I wrote lyrics, okay? But then I started writing poetry, and I had 4 books published, poetry books published.
Well, a song is sort of like poetry when you write the lyric out.
And I really enjoyed it, and some of my former peers in the industry, and when we would read some of my poetry, were so surprised. They didn't know that side of me.
Incredible. Well, I tell you, then you became, in 2009, Vice Chairman of the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame, and you were inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2009 as well, the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame here.
Yes, I was originally from North Carolina, as I pointed out, and so this was a tremendous honor to me to be asked to be involved in the revitalization of the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame, as well as to be inducted into North Carolina Music Hall of Fame after being out of the state for many, many years.
Well, it's amazing, and it's cool that you guys have done that because there's so much music that comes from North Carolina. Well, not when I say music, songwriters, artists, just tons of folks out here.
Well, you know, Daryl, I've been in the music business and there are many facets of it for so many years. I was pretty aware of everything that was happening in the United States for music, but what really surprised me, I had no idea that North Carolina had produced so many, not only number of people, of artists who became well-known nationally and internationally, but also in every different genre of music. For instance, in jazz, bluegrass, gospel, black and white gospel, country. It's amazing.
Well, tell us some of the, we're looking at some of the exhibits down the hall. Who are some of the exhibits that you have in, and who are from North Carolina?
There again, and the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame represents all these genres of music with all these great artists from the Benny King to Clyde McPhatter of the Drifters, which was a very famous group in the 50s, to country artists like Randy Travis, George Hamilton IV, Del Reeves. It goes on and on. And then in bluegrass, you got J.E. Maynard, you got Curly Seckler, you got boy, so many. Just
tons of. Well, tell us about now. We were talking
jazz, of course, Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, and name after name in jazz, and I could go on in gospel, in both gospel, black gospel and what I consider sacred white gospel.
Well, in Carolina Beach music, which we talk about a little bit in the radio show, who are some of the artists in there? I know there's
we had like the chairman of the board, you know, and Billy Scott and helped me here.
Maurice Williams.
Yeah,
I'm helping him out. It's amazing that you can forget, because as I walk through here, there's so many that you do forget. Tons of folks, even like I know when we were at the induction ceremony a couple weeks ago, Rick Dees, who's standing here in front of us from Greensboro, North Carolina, who's a DJ, fellow DJ kind of guy. Just tons of folks out there, and we're going to walk around here shortly, and I'm going to get some video for folks to check this out.
Yeah. Guys, like the gentleman boy Ken Knox now with his new group.
Yeah, Ken Knox and Company,
Knox,
KCO. It's incredible.
And we just inducted like the Catalinas. Boy, I hate to leave out so many.
There's just
names,
tons of them. There's tons. Right. But just saying, as I sat around and I look, winding up our interview a little bit, Andy Griffith is standing over there in his uniform. James Taylor. Yeah, you don't really think about James Taylor being from North Carolina and all that.
But he grew up here. He wasn't born here. The criteria for induction is that you either had to be born in North Carolina or spend a significant amount of time here during your career. And James fits that category, James Taylor. And so does Maurice.
He had Carolina on his mind.
Of course, a major hit called Carolina on his mind. Right. And so I'm so proud to be a part of an organization that represents so many great artists.
Incredible. Well, your career itself, folks, as we talked earlier in the interview here about that, and what you've done, and you paved a way for a lot of African-American folks in the music business for what you've done. And there's actually a book out called Against All Odds. It's the incredible life story of you, Eddie Ray.
Well, thank you.
And you can find this book on Amazon. It's out there, folks. You can get it for your Kindle and all that. And read. It's a great read to go more in depth than what we were talking about, to find out more about you and what you've done. You can find out more about Eddie Ray too, eddieraymusicman.com. You can go there, and also NorthCarolinaMusicHallOfFame.org to find out more about this terrific place, because I'm telling you, it's a lost gem in a way in North Carolina that not enough people know that North Carolina has a Music Hall of Fame and what it brings and the artists that came from it.
And they have no idea all the great talent.
And it's incredible talent. Right. And we'll start posting on our website, Darin and Anita on Grand Strand, and also CBMZ, next year's ceremony, induction ceremony, folks. We'll let you know when you can get tickets for that, so folks can come out and check that out. Eddie Ray, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us and the fans out there.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for we really let help us expose the Hall of Fame to more and more people, because it's going to be worth your time. Oh,
it's definitely that. Being here today, it's sort of like when you walk through the door, there's an ambiance that comes in. If you're a music buff or fan, you get this feeling of just, I don't know, the talent that's standing in here, and the outfits that a lot of the folks wore, and tons of stuff. Folks, we'll be telling you more about the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame and lots of other things here on CBMZ and Darin and Anita on Grand Strand, so keep us in tune. We'll talk to you down the road.